r/AskReddit. Serious, what were the creepiest declassified documents of the last decade? Operation Sea Spray. The US Navy literally released pathogens in San Francisco in order to affect the whole population, just to see what happened. A lot of people developed diseases like pneumonia and UTIs. Disgusting that even after this there was no repercussion to the government for the man who died from this, leaving his wife to suffer because of these medical bills in both lower courts and the Supreme Court letting the government get away with murder. Did you know it's impossible to predict some things? For example, how dust will disperse. Even if you knew how much dust, when, wind speed, humidity, pressure, etc., you wouldn't know how it disperses. Even with today's supercomputers, too many variables. So, if you are the military and want to know how biological chemical agents would disperse if dropped from a plane, there's really only one thing you can do. You drop tons of zinc cadmium sulfide on unsuspecting people, or disease, or bugs. Edit. A word. Operation Northwoods. Proposed false flag attacks against American civilians targets carried out by the CIA and blamed on Cuba in 1962. Thankfully JFK said duck no and shut that shit down. I'm not sure what's more frightening, the documents that have been released or the thought that they have all been released to give off the appearance of transparency, all while hiding much worse things in the process. I think you're right on this one. They are sacrificing a little bit to conceal the larger pieces. Basically every Broken Arrow incident, especially the ones that occurred during the Soviet collapse, the idea that the military can just lose track of a nuclear bomb, a miniature sun basically, is already terrifying, even if most of the devices are recovered. However, Russia lost track of about 200 nuclear bombs after the collapse of the USSR, and they will have no idea where they are. I understand that the Soviet Union fell apart in the 90s, but since so many of their nuclear bombs are still unaccounted for, I consider it an ongoing crisis. You can't set off a nuclear device without the proper means. Cuban Missile Crisis stuff is still being declassified to this day and all of it is terrifying. Tell us more. The document declassified just a couple weeks ago. The war in the Middle East that we've been fighting for over a decade is completely unwinnable, and they've known this for a majority of the war. It was similar with Vietnam. They know as early as like 1964 to 1965 that the chance of success was almost non-existent. They also just continued it because they didn't want America to appear weak on the world stage. Literally everything they tried for the first 5 or so years backfired terribly. But hey, we sold a lot of guns, vehicles, helicopters, rations, etc. to our own military. It's a win for some people, just at the cost of many people's lives. The war was never meant to be won, it's meant to be endless. The Panama Papers is frighteningly fascinating. Couldn't believe the author committed suicide by car bomb either. That's certainly an elaborate way to go after exposing scores of the most powerful people on the planet for hiding their wealth and avoiding taxation. All the things Edward Snowden leaked. What did he leak? Western countries, USA, UK, AUS, unfiltered mass surveillance on their own population, including access to phone records and even activation of private laptop webcams, all made possible through FISA court orders. That's why I always slap some tape over my laptop webcam. Apparently Germany was working on them in the 40s. Commenting a game cause I haven't seen it yet. 5 Ice Too Long didn't read. Whenever the country you live in needs to spy on its own citizens, they ask another country to do it for them, completely circumventing any perceived rights to privacy, a fair trial or due process, among others. Also sharing among member and associated states, if reports are to be believed, beyond cutting-edge technology that frankly borders on science fiction. Personally, I would say Operation Northwoods. nmwikipedia.org link the fact that the government has no qualms about staging a terrorist attack and killing its own citizens is scary. Project Artichoke and everything leading up to MKUltra is horrifying to think about. What are MKUltra and Artichoke? Artichoke and MKUltra were CIA's attempt of making mindless assassins from regular citizens, force-feeding them LSD to make them compliant to the researchers' wishes. This happened in the 50s. Imagine being on acid and that's what you have to deal with. It's like every bad trip. The CIA is after me, man. But then it's actually happening. Reality and imagination are already hard to distinguish on that stuff. The Afghanistan papers once again proved that above all my country will do anything, including once again lying to its citizenry to satiate its military-industrial complex. Many of those veterans will never be the same, be it physically or mentally, all because instead of admitting defeat or using logic beforehand, our officials went guns a-blazing into a situation they knew we couldn't win and did it anyway. If that doesn't awaken the cynicism in you, then nothing will. Operation Unthinkable. The plan for the UK and US to launch a surprise attack against the USSR at the end of World War II. Actually ones that have not been released. Rather, they've been classified for another 65 years. King Cora Boys Home. A boys' home in Belfast, NI, where a lot of high-profile politicians and even royalty are said to have abused the boys. MI5 are supposed to have known about it and used the info to blackmail people. What really went on that the Gov wants to keep it secret for another 65 years? CIA files detailing how they can remotely access cars and take control of it. The recently released files on the Finders. What is that? They're files about an organized group of individuals named the Finders, known for child abduction and trafficking. Links to CIA files being disclosed recently as part of the FOIA. Take a trip down the rabbit hole. It's terrifying. Project Starfish Prime. In 1962, the USA in the middle of the Cold War wanted to know what would happen if you made an atomic bomb explode in the magnetosphere. Knowing scientists at the time had zero idea on the size of effects, the government decided to test the experience without any models and directly on terrain. Thus Project Starfish Prime happened, where the government literally blew a bomb in the magnetosphere and it jeopardized to know if we'd die or not. Our magnetosphere took 30 years to recover from it. That teaches about how dumb and inconsiderate science can also be. This is when the idea for an EMP weapon was born also. Some of those tests took out communications networks and yes, vacuum tube electronics along with solid state stuff back then. So the saying that vacuum tube device will survive and EMP is almost completely false. Just depends on how shielded and robust the tubes are versus the strength of said EMP. If you're interested in the UFO phenomenon, then the Wilson memo is absolutely fascinating. Technically, it's not declassified but leaked. It contains notes by an admiral regarding a meeting held with an official that goes into detail regarding all of the most delightful UFO related discussions of the past half century or so and the way the control of the information has been managed. It's very conspiratorial in tone, but highly compelling once you start reading through the details. It refers to captured craft, core secrets and black budgets. The story covers the meeting attended by Admiral Wilson in which he was attempting to gain access to information regarding UFO related special access programs and his frustration at the blocks that he encountered for which his apparent rank and security clearance. He was a director of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Meant nothing. The link above covers the story quite comprehensively, but as a taster, the meeting took place about 10 days later, in mid-June 1997. According to Wilson, he flew out there to a conference room in a secure vault. There he met with the three individuals, the program director, the corporate attorney, and the security director, whom he noted was retired from the NSA and was a counterintelligence expert. They called themselves the Watch Committee or the Gatekeepers. This was because some years earlier the entire program was nearly outed during a Pentagon audit investigation. They were there to ensure the program remained ultra secret. On that previous occasion they were forced to brief the government investigator on the program. In the aftermath of that episode they somehow made a formal agreement with the Pentagon to prevent this in the future. What this meant was exceptionally tight controls to allow any US government personnel into the program. Public status or rank were irrelevant. You could only gain entry by meeting and specified criteria as determined by the Watch Committee. As Wilson put it, their way or the highway. He was mad. This group was operating without proper oversight from legitimate US government agencies. And furthermore, he learned that the purpose of the meeting was to deny his access. His credentials and government authority was proper and valid, but he wasn't on the bigot list. This is a term in the classified world referring to the people who are cleared to have a need to know. The admiral was told he did not have a need to know. I don't know if it's truly creepy, but we are just now getting more about how much influence the military has had in Hollywood. People knew about the Pentagon film liaison but didn't, and still don't, realize the scope of what's going on. Most people know the government provides support to the film industry. Top Gun was essentially a Navy recruitment video. However, how often and how much the government influences Hollywood has come out in order to receive any kind of aid, like military equipment, in movies or TV shows. The Pentagon reviews and provides strong suggestions for changes in the script. It was previously thought the number of movies and TV shows that had undergone this process was around 500. Through FOIA request in the last 5-10 years, we've learned it's been more like 1,800 productions. If you want to go down the rabbit hole, Google Phil Strub. He worked as an entertainment liaison for the Pentagon for a while. Edit. Changed from Air Force recruitment video to Navy. Typed that up at 2 AM my time. Could have sworn I put Navy. Thanks for pointing out the mistake. Edit 2. I see how Top Gun was essentially a recruitment video is controversial, confusing. I don't mean that the entire movie was specifically made for a recruitment purpose. I mean the number of people who enlisted significantly increased after the release. I forget the name, but there is a series of documents about the CIA attempting to do mind control experiments on citizens during the Cold War. Edit. It was called Project Mkultra. The Men Who Stare at Goats was based on similar experiments. I am kind of late to the party, so this will probably get buried, but is worth sharing nonetheless. A few months back I came across a very detailed report about a CIA operation named Operation Pegasus. Long story short, the CIA worked with Escobar and imported great quantities of cocaine into the USA for numerous reasons, two of which are profits for them and destabilizing African American communities. The military were in on it, and the guy who blew the whistle on the whole thing was one of the Air Force pilots who made the deliveries. He describes in detail the entire operation, links many people to the operation, many of whom are very recognizable names even now, and overall it is one deep rabbit hole. The documents should not be that hard to find online. Anything involving Japan's Unit 731 during World War II. It was a military chemical and biological warfare division that experimented on powers. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content. It's free and that's a great price.